2010, Universal produced The Wolfman, which is a remake of the 1941 film The Wolfman. Notice the space between wolf and man? Maybe I should be calling the 2010 version The Wolfman. The remake stars Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt, and Hugo Weaving. It was also directed by Joe Johnston, who is well known for his visual effects work in the original Star Wars. And the movie cost $150 million to make, which makes it pretty funny when you realize that the movie was a total box office flop. I mean, it didn't even make back its budget. According to the president of Universal Studios at the time, the film was crappy and one of the worst movies they ever made. Critics and audiences seem to dislike the film, which comes in pretty low on some of the major rating sites. Why then would anyone bother watching this film? Well, because I love watching bad movies, of course. For one, I think they're funny, and also I don't feel guilty talking over them. But also, there's a planned reboot of The Wolfman scheduled to be released in October 2024. That's probably why I've been seeing this 2010 film popping up everywhere recently. And so, in advance of the new film coming out, I decided to create my version of a movie review where I analyze the good, the bad, and the downright silly parts of this film. And with that introduction, let's get started with The Wolfman.
Show yourself! I know you're out there!
In the opening of the film, we see Ben Talbot walking around looking for someone, but after watching the rest of the movie, I don't think it's actually ever explained who he's looking for and why he's out here. My guess is that there was a whole story here and this sequence was much longer, but then they cut it all down. Really loud whip cracking noise here with no explanation for a jump scare. This guy has had his stomach and face slashed by a werewolf and his guts are spilling out, but he's still able to run like that? He must have very high constitution. This opening sequence lasts about 2 minutes, which is a pretty bad signal to me. They added a couple of cheap scares and they didn't bother taking time to build any tension or suspense. It's like the movie is too busy to take the time to make the scene good and they just need a scene where this character dies.
It has come to my attention that you are currently here in England with your theatre company, but that you return to America soon.
So Lawrence is an actor who grew up in America. I wonder if they wrote this in after they cast Del Toro because they didn't want him attempting an English accent. Welcome home, Lawrence. Your brother just got murdered at the beginning of the movie. And they use the dog for a jump scare here. This movie's really trying to keep up their SPM. That's scares per minute. Notice this bit where they just put Sir John at the top of the stairs really quickly between these shots? It's like he's been waiting behind a curtain for the dog to jump out and do the jump scare before he then jumps out onto the stairs for the next scene.
Lawrence? Hello, Father.
They keep Ben's body in a cooler, but given that his corpse has been laying outside for several weeks, it seems like it would be so rotten that the ice wouldn't be doing much. And I know it's 1891, but did nobody raise objections to keeping this weeks-old body in the same place as all this meat? Another jump scare when they show you how gruesome his body is. Again, it's a high scare rate.
I saw the bodies with my own eyes. Unnatural wounds. Most unnatural.
Why is the priest hanging out in the tavern?
And then he tears up the bodies to make it look like a wild beast was responsible.
Ridiculous.
This scene where a bunch of old men are speculating about how Ben died is really jarring. Who are these characters? Are we supposed to remember them for later? Why are there so many different shots cut together so fast? Ugh.
I want to know what happened to him.
I'll do everything I can.
Gwen wants to know how her fiancé died, and Lawrence says he'll help. But how much can Lawrence really do here? I mean, he's just an actor. Doesn't he want to try talking to a detective first before he starts doing his own snooping? Lawrence is wearing a banded collar here. That wouldn't be my first choice in pajamas, but okay. Mother! We get a flashback to Lawrence finding his mother after she died to give it a little bit of backstory. The staging of this scene really bothers me. They picture her as having cut her own throat with a razor, and the razor is in her hand and Sir John is holding her. Lots of questions. Why do this outside in a random spot in the garden? Also, Sir John must have found her there and picked her up to hold her, but now the razor is perfectly laid in her hand. It's kind of an awkward scene that seems more like a still composition from a painting. Not to say I don't like paintings, but film is a moving medium, so I would prefer making use of that here and having some motion rather than just a static scene. I mean, we'll find out later that this is an intentionally crappy flashback, but we'll get to that later. This mausoleum looks like the Jefferson Memorial. I like the composition of this shot, even though it looks really uncomfortable for Gwen to be laying on some rocks like that.
Which is why he put me in an asylum for a whole year. He shipped me off to my aunt in America.
He spent a year in an asylum and the rest of his childhood growing up in a different country just because his dad didn't like him. This guy's got daddy issues, which he probably draws on when he's acting.
When do you return to London?
Not till I find out what happened to my brother.
Oh man, the theater company's not going to be happy about that. Also, if you're really that concerned about finding out what happened to him, why have you still not talked to a detective?
The moon is full tonight, and I prefer that you stay inside.
Here's my reaction to this little exchange when I watched this live. So the dad is the werewolf? Is the dad the werewolf? And then later in the film, I said this. If the dad is the werewolf, I'm going to be not surprised. And I will have said that I called it, and I will point out why and how I called it. Let's take a quick look at some reasons why this might be true. Well, they've really gone all out with associating Sir John with beasts. He's got stuffed animal heads in his house. He wears animal fur. He's always talking about wild animals.
I've seen the work of a Kodiak bear and a Bengal tiger. Nature at its most vicious, but must say I've never seen anything like this.
And he even has his trees pruned to look like animals. And on top of that, the only other thing that he was interested was the moon.
She exerts enormous power, doesn't she?
And now they have this very obvious exchange where Sir John says, oh, by the way, don't go out during the full moon because, well, I have a hunch. A little bit of insight, they refer to this group as gypsies in the film, which makes sense in England at the given time period. Today, the term would be Romani. In the original 1941 film, Lawrence ended up at this camp with Gwen on a semi-date because they wanted to go see a fortune teller.
Ask him if he knows anyone who sells these.
I appreciate that there's a detective element to the film here where Lawrence is pursuing clues like this pendant. It's a handy writing device to get characters to visit certain places and interact with certain people. So I generally like that.
It was found in my brother's body.
There is no coincidence.
We only get to see about 20 seconds of this conversation. I think this would be a good time to add some more exposition and build things up, but instead they cut directly to a nighttime raid. Oh, and the werewolf, whoever the werewolf is, shows up at the same time too. The coincidence of basically every character showing up at the same time during a full moon is a little too much for me to believe.
Nonsense. He dances, that's all.
Oh, I love this cute little CGI bear. So in rapid succession, the police show up and then the werewolf starts killing tons of people. This movie really needs to let off the gas a little bit. I know we're trying to keep the runtime low here, but maybe manage the pace a little bit more. This guy friendly fired and then died. That's a negative KD. Lawrence handles this rifle like he's done it 1,000 times before. Not that professional actors can't be good with guns, but it seems unlikely. We finally get our save the cat moment. Everyone else is running around in a panic, but our hero sees a woman about to be killed and puts himself in danger to save her life. Now we know we're supposed to be rooting for him for the rest of the film. Lawrence takes the shot and almost hits the werewolf from what seems like much too far to hit anything accurately with that rifle. And now he runs off to save a child, which further establishes him as the good guy. Pretty much everyone this werewolf kills is dead immediately, except our main character, who gets chomped on for a solid couple seconds and then lives to tell the tale.
He can only be released by someone who loves him.
So can this werewolf curse be lifted by a kiss like Beauty and the Beast? The effects to make this mansion look dilapidated make it come off as fake to me.
Sikh is a warrior of God. He must always arm himself against evil.
How could you stand it here all these years? You didn't have to stay.
We still never get a good answer for why Singh chooses to live here and be Sir John's servant, which I think is an interesting question, and I would like to learn more about this character. Unfortunately, the only thing that we get to learn about in this scene is that he's got a bunch of silver bullets, which I'm sure won't be important later. Finally, we get a detective, though it's a little bit late for Lawrence.
He's suffering from a loss of memory. I don't think he could be of any use to you now.
And if I could have just a few words with him, completely unofficial interview, even the briefest.
He's also coming here asking a ton of questions, and then Sir John tells him, hey, you gotta come back with a warrant, dude. Okay, it took me a few seconds, but now I remember this is Agent Smith from The Matrix.
Mr. Anderson. Or a lunatic, perhaps. Someone with a history of mental disturbance who's spent time inside an asylum.
Wait, so the detective's coming in here accusing Lawrence of being the killer, even though he's the one who almost got killed by the werewolf last night in front of plenty of witnesses? Not sure where this logic is coming from. Seems like the whole point of this scene is just to establish the inspector as the bad guy.
Lawrence?
Yeah.
Man, these two love finding each other in the woods. They're really trying to make this romance happen, but I don't think skipping rocks is the key to Gwen getting over her dead fiancé so that she could start hooking up with his brother.
Yeah?
Yes.
When you throw it.
Wow, it's exactly like that scene from Barbie.
Let me show you.
Here. Let me show you.
Here, let me show you.
Here. Let me show you.
Here, let us show you.
Sorry, Colonel. I meant to shoot you. No, you're trespassing on my land and I could shoot you on the spot right now.
Hopkins is great in this role. I just find myself enjoying the sound of his voice.
The villagers, they're backward and foolish.
Wow, some elitism coming from Gwen. Hey buddy, my eyes are up here.
You have to leave. Please pack your things.
Now Lawrence is telling her to leave because he knows he's a werewolf. Probably the first smart thing that anyone's done so far.
If anything ever happened to you, I'd never forgive myself.
He basically just met her and she was engaged to his brother. It's kind of unsettling how attached he is to this romance now.
The power of Satan to change men into beasts.
Yep, this CGI deer must be where all the budget went.
Foul demon. I say to you, the enemy's ploys.
Look, these guys are just spilling the silver all over the table. This is a werewolf situation. You're gonna need all the silver you can get.
Fortunately, Cursed does not give me a warrant to wander about Sir John's estate at night.
You remember how I mentioned a warrant earlier? Now he knows. Lawrence just followed Sir John to the crypt. How did Sir John have enough time to light all these candles? Finally, we get the first werewolf transformation on screen. Apparently, one of the reasons why the pacing in this movie is messed up is because they cut down a bunch of stuff prior to this transformation because they wanted to get here faster. And the transformation happens soon after this big reveal that Sir John is the werewolf.
The beast will out.
My question though is that if you're going to frame Lawrence anyways, why bother saving him from the villagers earlier? Seems like you could have accomplished the same thing without even revealing yourself as the werewolf if you had just let the villagers take him away. They ended up going with CGI for the transformation scene, and this was probably a huge bummer for makeup artist Rick Baker. This scene is pretty mid for me. It doesn't really add much value. It's not exceptionally thrilling or gruesome. This is our first look at the werewolf makeup, and this is award-winning makeup, so maybe my opinion isn't totally right here, but I've never been a huge fan of this look just because of how much it looks like a dude with a bad haircut. Like, it looks like he's got some weird pompadour thing going on with his hair. I don't know, based on the number of silly werewolf movies that they've made, maybe this look has just been ruined for me. What a crazy coincidence that he woke up just moments before they came to arrest him.
I am sorry to see you back here with us, Lawrence.
So they brought him back to the same asylum that he was in as a child, and now they're forcing him to do the Huberman morning routine. You can see him here taking a cold shower every morning.
Long sustained increase in dopamine from cold water exposure is really powerful, and it increases body temperature.
We get another big reveal here when Sir John comes to visit him in the asylum. While in werewolf mode, Sir John killed both Lawrence's mother and his brother.
You killed my mother.
Yeah, I suppose I did.
This is where we learn that the flashback of Lawrence's mother's death was not actually how it happened. He was gaslit into thinking that his mother killed herself with a razor when she was actually killed by Sir John in beast mode. So let's say that the earlier flashback was intentionally awkward to represent Lawrence's skewed memory. I still don't think there's much payoff to that decision here. For one, I'm failing to understand how Sir John could have killed his wife while in wolf mode while not killing either of his two sons. I mean, we even saw that Lawrence leaves the house at night. Also, if Sir John has been a werewolf since both of his sons were very young and Ben was raised by his father, I don't believe that he could have kept that a secret the whole time. How was he hiding it? Oh yeah, every full moon I like to go camping on a trip where it's just me. overall, while I do appreciate that there's a twist, it bothers me that it feels like it has a lot of holes in it.
Ah, Mr. Talbot.
All these doctors and scientists showed up for this lecture about a guy who thinks he's a werewolf, and then that guy actually turns into a werewolf. The dramatic irony of this scene is enough to make you cringe the whole time, plus this whack transformation is pretty funny. All these really smart guys can't seem to figure out how to open a door. Apparently this was before the time of fire codes.
It seems to be locked, sir.
So this guy tries to unlock this door but can't because I guess he doesn't have the keys. Also, the custodian doesn't have the keys. Who in the world has the means to unlock this door? Guess we'll never find out. So it seems the American werewolf has finally made it to London.
Hi, David.
There is not a chance in the world that you hit anything at that distance while running with a handgun. I wonder if drinking the polluted water from the Thames is enough to kill the werewolf. Gwen operates an antique store in this film, which is actually the same as in the 1941 film.
I would have given anything I own to have known you in another life.
As you'd expect when you look at the runtime and consider the plot of the film, this is where they shoehorn in the kiss between Lawrence and Gwen. This kind of goes without saying, but I don't really buy into their romance, especially because she's just swooning for him in every scene, despite him acting strange and disturbed all the time. But I imagine that most people watching this movie aren't interested in high-fidelity romance, so I guess this gets a pass. Here we go again with the police coming in without a warrant.
Should you find yourself in his presence?
Is it just me, or does this sketch on the paper not really look like Lawrence?
Now there's some bad luck for you.
In this funny scene, the inspector breaks a mirror to review a statue of the devil on the other side. These signs of bad luck are foreshadowing his getting bitten by a werewolf at the end of the film. It's a little heavy-handed, but the device is effective. Too bad that the inspector didn't have any salt to throw over his left shoulder.
Will you condemn him? Or will you set him free?
It's very unclear what she means by this, and it's not explained later in the movie. Condemning him and setting him free both mean killing him, apparently. The only difference is if he's killed by somebody who loves him or the law, I guess. Maybe this makes a difference for the afterlife, but for the average moviegoer, I think being shot through the heart is the same no matter who's doing it. Sir John killed his servant Singh, and we find out in a jump scare, which is a shame because he's one of the characters that I like, so I was really bummed out that he didn't even get an on-screen death. And they get another jump scare from Samson the dog. There are only 10 minutes left in the movie. Can we get through the jump scares so that I can see what happens?
Oh, the beast is the beast.
I removed the powder from those shells many years ago.
You removed the powder from the silver bullet shotgun shells, but I find it hard to believe that Singh couldn't tell the difference between a full and hollow cartridge. Did he replace the powder with sand? Either way, too bad for Lawrence. We get a father-son werewolf battle in the burning family home here. What seems a bit off to me though is that they just continue fighting as if they were still both human. I mean, if they're both raging beasts, it makes sense that they would fight if they see each other, but it seems like for the sake of the story, they kept up this idea that they're fighting because of the bad blood between them. And this creative decision kind of implies that they have some control over their beast side, which makes it all the more disturbing that Lawrence just murdered all of those villagers.
You've done terrible things.
See here that they have Sir John rip his shirt off so that you know which one he is. It's shirts versus skins, well, shirts versus furs. Lawrence wins the fight by throwing Sir John into the fire and lopping his head off. That fur goes up in flames like it's soaked in kerosene. Maybe the villagers should be using fire to complement their silver bullets. And we get the final scene at the waterfall, which makes sense given its previously stated importance.
Lawrence, you know me.
They have a moment here where Lawrence as a werewolf seems to recognize Gwen, further disproving the theory that he just kills people indiscriminately. This isn't Beauty and the Beast though. He's not being cured by a true love's kiss anytime soon.
It had to be this way.
It's funny that he says this because the movie itself did not have to end this way. In fact, they shot several alternate endings which were available on the Blu-ray copy of the movie, which I haven't gotten my hands on yet, but I could be convinced to as I venture further down my rabbit hole of monster movies. And so, similar to a Shakespeare tragedy, most of the characters that we were introduced to end up dying in the end, which is really at the crux of the werewolf story. Given this ending note, when they roll credits, you're like, okay, well, that happened. Overall, I like this film. Naturally, there are some things that feel very off, which is most likely due to the production hell that this film went through. There are pacing issues with plenty of stuff feeling rushed. The reveals are not too surprising, but I appreciate them anyways. Overall, I see why people would be disappointed in the film. It doesn't really bring anything fresh to the genre. It delivers what I see as a pretty standard werewolf drama. Now, I mentioned the reboot that they're planning to release this year, and what I'm hoping for with that is that it's set in modern day and that they do an overhaul of the Wolfman story that approaches the werewolf story from another angle. I think that's what made the Invisible Man remake so successful. Rather than doing the old story, they made a mystery thriller based on the same concept. So while not totally a remake, it was an appealing new look at an existing concept that, at the end of the day, sold tickets. My hopes are not super high though. So far it seems like there's been a lot of moving parts for this new movie, which is pretty similar to what the 2010 film went through in production. I mean, there were people attached to the project who then ended up leaving, and then they attached other people to the project. With the 2010 film, they went very, very far over budget. Only time will tell though, so if the new movie is successful, hey, we get a good movie. If it bombs, well then I'll just make a video about it. So that's all for now. Remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, remember to beware the full moon.